You are just logging in. This is taking a faithful stance for racial equity. And we are your friends from the coalition that has been hosting this. Wisconsin Council of Churches, Wisdom, Interfaith Conference of Greater Milwaukee, and friends from other faith-based advocacy organizations. And we are grateful to have you with us. Feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. And as folks enter, they can join the rest of us and make the chat your place for questions. We are excited to have some colleagues from Lutheran Social Services with us this evening and to have the chance to learn about what is at stake in funding for faith-based nonprofits, which is an unfortunately hot topic right now. We wish it didn't need to be, but we know it is affecting a great many of the organizations that we know and love, and also that are making a difference in the communities we serve and communities that are far beyond those we see every day, but we know that our faiths call us to attend to as they're among some of the most vulnerable people in the world. So with that in mind, I would like to start with offering a very brief devotion, and then I will introduce our speakers. My name's Reverend Carrie Parker. I'm the Executive Director of the Wisconsin Council of Churches, and it is my joy to have hosting duties this evening. The opening reflection comes from Church World Service. It is lightly adapted. Join me in a spirit of prayerful reflection. As human beings sharing this world, we all seek our own ways of creating a secure environment. Due to circumstances beyond our control, some of us find ourselves facing situations that we could never have imagined. This is especially true for those who have been uprooted from their homes because of war and persecution. All are struggling to make a new life in an unfamiliar place. All have had to give up much of what is most precious to them simply to survive. It can be hard for those of us accustomed to our peaceful lives to imagine what it must be like to be a refugee. And yet, as the United Nations High Commission on Refugees said, refugees are just like you and me, except they have nothing. Holy One, by all the names we know you, and by all the mercies we know from you, help us learn together, bind us into community, help us to be people of mercy and hospitality and generosity and peace. Show us the way to be more human together. Amen. I am pleased to introduce our speakers this evening. We have guests from Lutheran Social Services, and while our connections to Lutheran Social Services are not recent, some of the closest work we've done with Lutheran Social Services was during the Afghan refugee crisis several years ago in Wisconsin, and we were grateful to be able to partner. My colleague Sarah happens to be one of those connections we began to build at that time. And her colleague, Omar, also began his work as a refugee who came into this field and grew through his first person experience to be able to bring compassion and professionalism to those who now have needs as refugees. So, Sarah's experience as a preacher's kid and a service provider now comes into her work as a community relations person. Ahmed's life experience as a refugee and a professional comes into these deep and unfortunately evolving needs today that are facing the organization and its ability to serve refugees. And between the two of them, they have an important story to tell about the situation of Lutheran social services and how it illustrates what's happening to so many faith-based organizations right now. So Sarah and Omar, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much for that warm welcome. It's so great to be with you and so many familiar faces on the screen. We're just delighted to be able to share with you a little bit of our story this evening. Let me see if I can share my screen here as we get things started. We'll try and make sure that this all works. And
While Sarah is trying, thank you for letting us come and speak to you guys and giving us this opportunity to listen to us. Again, thank you. This means a lot to us at this time.
absolutely, Omar. So we are so excited to be able to share a little bit with you of our perspective this evening. And there really is a lot at stake with the many changes that have occurred in the past couple of months. We want to give you just a glimpse into that impact by doing a little bit of a deeper dive into refugee resettlement. And I want to emphasize that the information that we're going to be sharing with you tonight is true as of today, as of March 11th, 2025, and also acknowledging that we know things change every day. So this might be different in another week, but we want to share with you what we know as of today. Please note, though, that any kind of program updates that we may have at Lutheran Social Services would be reflected on our LSS refugee webpage. So you'll be able to find that there. But truly, one of the things that makes us who we are is that our core belief at LSS is that we believe in the infinite worth of every person. And as we note this familiar scripture from the passage in the 25th chapter of Matthew, we recognize that programs like refugee resettlement are where LSS has that chance to serve our neighbor, where we welcome that stranger and we help people in their time of greatest need. Now, as we go through the presentation tonight, I would invite you to write a comment in the chat if you come across something that maybe is new to you or maybe surprises you, or if you have a question as we're going through this, something that comes to mind that you just want to get out so that we can address that later. I would invite you to use the chat function as we do that.
All right, thank you, Sarah. I'll take it from here. Again, I am Omar. I'm the program manager for the Refugee Resettlement Program. And today I'm going to start with what are refugees, or more appropriately, who are refugees? Often many people confuse the term like immigrant, asylees, and refugees. So let's discuss a little bit, dispel those confusion. So refugees are different from asylees and immigrant. The difference can be generalized, as you can see, immigrant, asylees, and refugees. Immigrants are folks who left their country voluntarily, mostly in terms of search of better life and better opportunities. In other words, they can, most of them. Asylees leave their homeland in seek of protection and safe haven in a second language, in a second country. And then we have refugees who are mainly driven from their homeland while fleeing violences and war and seek safety in a second country where they stay as a refugee and then seek resettlement in a third country. Now, just the last 2.5 years, we have two minor category added to this. I know it's kind of an update. We have during the Afghan, when they came, they given a special category known as humanitarian parolees. So because they don't fit any of this, they never fled from their country. The government have to take them away. So they are given that. So we also serve those. But then also due to the Russian and Ukrainian war, we got another category known as TPS. So it's a temporary protective services. And that means the Ukrainian people, their government is still there to protect because refugees don't have that protection. But the Ukrainian, in this case, they have. But at the same time, it's dangerous for them to stay there. So those who can afford manage to come through here. And that's where they fall into that category. We also serve those two categories on top of these three. So these are the distinct differences of the immigrants and refugees and asylees. So what is the refugee resettlement then? What is it? So refugee resettlement is a humanitarian effort between the UN and the US. Historically, over 1 million immigrants admitted to the US each year. Now, in this sense, when I'm saying immigrant, I'm lumping refugee in it. So refugee makes just a small percentage of that. Now, LSS serves refugee asylees, and as the two other category I added, with the services they need. But now there are some services that like legal adjustment, things like that, we are not certified and we don't have the license to, so we refer those out. And Sarah can elaborate a little bit historical events or historical dates about how it started and all of that. Take it away, Sarah.
Yep, sorry, just had to unmute myself. The remnants of a cold are catching me with the cough. All right, so talking about why do we have refugees coming here in the first place? Why are they coming? The United States started welcoming refugees following the Refugee Convention in 1951, and LSS of Wisconsin and Upper Michigan has been welcoming refugees for over 50 years. Churches throughout Wisconsin extended their welcoming arms, their open doors, and support to the first group of Hmong refugees. Maybe some of you remember that back in the 1970s. And churches and citizen groups and communities have continued to welcome refugees since that time. Now, refugee populations have changed over time, but the recognition is still there that there's a need to provide safety for folks.
You muted.
I must have put my cursor over the wrong spot. Sorry about that. Okay, so how is it that refugees are connected to LSS? This journey is not an easy one. People make their way first to a United Nations office, then they undergo intensive interviews by the UN in order to just simply earn that refugee status, and many do not get it. But that's where it starts. And after allocation to the United States for consideration of resettlement, there is an additional exhaustive security and medical check process that they go through that's required by our country. And only those approved refugee names then that make it through all of that are sent to the Department of State's Bureau of Population, Refugee, and Migration, which is also sometimes called PRM. And then they allocate that case to one of 9 different national voluntary agencies. And the one that we work with at LSS is Global Refuge. Some of you might have heard of them or maybe knew their previous name, which was Lutheran Immigration and Refugee Services. So when we think about this, you might wonder, why is it that refugees come to Wisconsin? How did they get here? Why did they come? And it's basically for one of 2 reasons. The first is that it was chosen for them when they arrived in the United States. As I said, Global Refuge determined that they would have the best support opportunities here in Wisconsin, maybe with other family members or friends who were already here. Maybe with a community of people that share their native language, they understand their values, their norms, and that the support system was there. And it's important for people to have that kind of community, to have affordable housing, to have good schools for their children, to make sure that there's jobs available in the place where they will be resettled, so that there's transportation options and all kinds of opportunities for them when they arrive. So the second reason why they come is that they chose to come here. Sometimes after that initial placement, they may have come to Wisconsin through a secondary migration for all those same reasons that we just talked about. They may have family and friends that are here. They might want to be closer to others who understand their culture and their language. And they may be coming because of the jobs or the opportunities with schools and things. One of the things I like to point out to people is that in the United States, we have the ability to make that choice for ourselves. It's one of the freedoms we all have and enjoy. If we want to move to another place, we can move to another place. Now, Omar can address this in some questions later, but I believe once they're actually placed with a resettlement agency, if they do choose to move too early, they may lose some of the benefits that they would have coming to them. But they have that opportunity just like we do. All right, so there's some important things to know, which Omar is going to help us to understand.
Yes. So to continue dispelling the information about refugees, what documents they have, are they similar to immigrant and things of that nature. So refugees arrive with permanent legal document statuses. So because these are folks who are vetted and proven and mainly selected by the federal government. So by the time they are coming, they were given all of their documentation. So some of these documents includes authorized employment, because of course they are expected to work when they come to fend for their own. And then they are eligible for all available benefits and services that any residents of Wisconsin eligible for, except voting. They can't vote. You gotta be a citizen. You gotta wait 5 years to vote. On top of that, you have to pass a test, which is an English test and a civics also. So you have to prove to the government that you can communicate English fluently and you at least know the basics or the fundamental of the American civics. So those are the refugees and what they come for. And then Sarah can elaborate into what they need to become self-sufficient as they seek for jobs.
Yes, as Omar just mentioned, that goal really is that these refugees become self-sufficient. They're expected to do that as soon as possible, not to remain dependent on any agency or any kind of community. And self-sufficient here means that their kids are going to school, that the adults are working, that they're paying their own expenses, that they're getting to places by themselves. They may be taking a bus or walking, or if they have access to a car, they're shopping independently, that they know how to ask questions, that they're learning English. They have to obey all the same laws and guidelines that are expected of any other one person in Wisconsin. So we know that they are meeting up to the same standards that we would have in the US.
So, and then where we come in to support this self-sufficient is outlined in this graphic you see it. I'm not going to go into details what it is. It kind of seems scary, but these are what the federal government is mandated us to follow to finish it for them for the first 90 days to help them smooth them reaching that self-sufficiency. As you can see, it starts from hours, you know, the minute we pick them up, 72 hours, goes to weeks, goes to months, up to 3 months. We have to do this back to back to back to the point where they can be self-sufficient within that 90 days. Now, like I say, there's a lot of details, and we do have this slide on our website at LSS. Which is lss.wiz, lsswiz.org/refugee. If you go into the website, you can see all this information. To reiterate again, we are here to help them reach that self-sufficient. The government brought them here so they can be on their own, because most of them never had a chance to even get a job, let alone get a documents with their names. never got an ID. So because never recognized as human being, they were all in camps most of their time. So again, refugees, they do really make us strong. There's no doubt that they make us strong. You know, we see this in every day. Again, Sarah will share some statistics about how they do make us, but they do really make us strong.
Thank you, Omar. And absolutely what you say is true. And maybe these are some things you hadn't heard before, but did you know that 55% of our country's billion-dollar startups are founded by immigrants? That 18.6% of foreign workers or of the civilian labor force is made up of foreign workers? I mean, that's almost 1 in 5. We have refugees that work in healthcare, IT, in management, finance, and all different kinds of jobs. And some refugees are paying into Social Security, for example, without ever reaping their benefits. So there's a lot that they really contribute.
Yes, and again, part of the contribution also involved working with the local employers. So LSS has been featured into the throughout Wisconsin for Refugee Employment Partnership. Some of those employers that we partner includes Hasco, Palermo Pizza, Vista Hotels. Then we worked with them to help these refugees make their transition easy. You know, this is this picture is taken from a video that was done by the WISN 12 with Hasco, where they're asked and how they came through. This was during the Afghan crisis. So this tells you how much they are contributing to the community versus what a lot of people think they're just taking it from it, but not just putting it. So again, but this is just our experience. Refugees don't just come to Wisconsin through LSS. There are other agencies. Actually, there are 9 other offices throughout Wisconsin that provides refugee resettlement. You may have heard from them, similar story, but this is just our version of it and how we experience or our view of it.
Thank you.
Sarah, next.
Yeah, and you know, there are so many heartwarming stories that highlight that successful transition into life in the United States, despite these absolutely unthinkable challenges that people are up against. And this is a story, Arif's story is one of those that we shared on social media, and with some of our donors as well. He arrived in the United States with some very intense medical needs following a shooting that had left him paralyzed. And working with our refugee resettlement staff, we were able to find him affordable housing that was also accessible so that he could get in and out. And with the help of a generous donor, we were actually able to get him a very specialized wheelchair so that he could get around and do things. And he's an amazing, amazing man who also has since helped as an interpreter. And here he's pictured during a dinner. Omar is there as well as some other LSS staff and I believe the donor that helped him with that wheelchair. And it's just a heartwarming story. And we know that there are lots and lots of these stories. So if you're interested in that, check out our webpage and some of our social media. So let's get to what's happening in these days today, right? There is a lot of things happening that have really made it very, very difficult for nonprofits. And here's a little bit about what's at stake for our refugee program. As of now, the contracts have now been terminated, so new refugees are not coming into our program. And we're faced with some pretty difficult decisions as a result of that. With the stop funding, we're not receiving the funds for those intensive services that Omar just described that we provide to people when they first arrive. And that includes funding that help to cover the very basics like rent and their basic needs when they first got here, the coordination of those services. At a recent presentation, when our president and CEO, Hector Colon, spoke to the South Central Synod of Wisconsin and the ELCA, he had reported that our financial need for the refugee program was at about $237,000 to help us get through April. That's what we knew then. As we see now, there's so many new changes coming that sustaining a program like this is very difficult. It's very hard when funding stops to maintain staffing and services. But I think that this goes to the last point. LSS and our clients are feeling the emotional threat of these actions, and it deeply impacts them mentally and emotionally. I'm certain this is true for our other partners around the state and other refugee programs as well, and many other kinds of programs too. So if you're wondering how large of an impact this is on a global scale, maybe just consider these numbers. These are the most recent available numbers through last year. More than 1 out of every 69 persons on Earth were displaced internationally. And this number has increased every year for the last 13 years. So this is not getting better, this is getting worse. Over 114 million persons were forcibly displaced. 36.4 million of those are refugees, and 6.1 million are asylum seekers. The rest are either internally displaced or they had other kinds of protection needs.
Yeah, and then Sarah, before you go in, I just want to add this one aspect as well. Those are people overseas, but then the impact that happened is when they are here is even worse, because as the new administration come in, as of January 20th, the executive order came in place. January 22nd, flights are canceled, no one came. January 24th, stop work order is put in place, which means we cannot serve those who came here. The federal fiscal year starts in October and ends of September 2025, October 24. This year, the last couple months for Biden administration, he was pushing to bring as many as possible. So as of now, we have about 44,363 refugee individual came from October to January 20th. When the new administration came, he said, no stop work order means we cannot even provide the little tiny funds that the government sends to serve these people, get them a house, furnish them, make sure they're situated, all the service that we are speaking of. So that's how much the impact is, not just the overseas, even those who are here are being impacted drastically. I just wanted to add that to bring it home.
Thank you, Omar.
Yes. So how can we work with refugees if I don't know the culture? I had a lot of colleagues who never knew the culture, including Sarah. So in shift work, so everybody will be fine. So yeah, and you may be feeling like many others called to do something to help, and you may also feel unprepared. So know this: every refugee comes with hopes and dreams. If we have time, I'll ask Sarah to play that Afghan video about the WISN. And you can see from their mouths and how appreciative they are. Seeing the US through their eyes can be a powerful experience. People cannot change quickly, as we know, and you cannot change them quickly, but you can help them by gently helping them navigate and learn the new culture. Mm-hmm. It is hard. Imagine you picked up and brought down in the middle of what's called Mogadishu, and you don't know the language. That's how they're feeling. If you just want to experience that.
Absolutely. Thank you, Omar. And I echo what Omar said. And remember, refugees never forget that kindness that's shown to them when they arrive. They might not have the words to be able to tell you, but I can tell you, having met with people, and you see that gratitude in their eyes, it's so evident. Refugees are also less likely to exhibit criminal behavior. They're more committed to succeeding, and they don't want to cause problems. They don't want to lose any of these kind of benefits. And they might not share the specific religion that you practice, but they often do share a very deep personal connection to spirit, and they are people of faith. And I'll also add that, our refugee resettlement staff definitely appreciate you as well. That need is great. With the support of volunteers, we're able to help refugees get what they need as soon as possible after they arrive. And as you support in sharing your gifts, this helps our program to be able to survive during difficult times. Your expertise and your love help refugees understand that they're welcomed by a larger community, by a church community, by the people in their own neighborhood. And it's more than just paid staff who want to be able to help. So there's a lot of ways that you might be able to get involved. Think about how God has blessed you. We talk a lot at LSS about people using their God-given gifts to serve. And you've been given gifts of time and talent and treasure and ties. Maybe you have the ability to become a volunteer and help a refugee learn about culture, maybe help provide some transportation until they learn to drive, or help navigate how to get through the grocery store, or maybe even join with members from your congregation to form a group of co-sponsors so that you may help a refugee team during that first 6 months that a refugee is here. Maybe you can help gather materials that are needed and items that they would need in their home as they first arrive. Maybe you might want to volunteer and help someone learn English and practice their language skills. Or maybe you can advocate, and we'll hear a little bit more about that later tonight, but maybe you can advocate and share your support for programs like Refugee Resettlement with your elected officials. Maybe you can tell other people about some things that you learned tonight, things that might have surprised you, so that we can help stop the spread of misinformation. Maybe you can pray. I think we can all do this. If you can pray for refugees, for staff who work with them, for our national partners, and for all who help to get this ministry going. We really appreciate that. If you do feel called to financially support the work of LSS, there is a barcode here on this screen that will take you directly to an emergency response fund that we have, where your gifts can be used and most appreciated by those in need. And just a quick idea for you, if you happen to be Lutheran or know someone who is, there's an additional opportunity where your contribution may be eligible for a full match. So every dollar that you donate will be matched by a generous donor. And you can go to lsswis.org/loving Lutherans to learn a little bit more about that. So tonight we really basically shared with you our perspective. We took a deeper dive into this particular program, talked a little bit about some of the recent changes that we've all been hearing about in the news. And just as Omar said, we are one of many refugee resettlement programs throughout Wisconsin. There are probably a lot of partners in your community that you can reach out to, and we would encourage you to do that. Give them a call, email them, see how they're doing, ask how you may be able to help, pray for them, and also prayerfully consider how you might be able to support them in various ways. So just lastly, I want to say to you, thank you so much for listening, for learning, for opening your hearts to even being here tonight. And I'll leave it up to the person watching our time to see if we have time to break into groups or if we just want to take questions from the floor at this point.
Hi, Sarah. It is Carrie talking. We have a couple of questions in the chat that I would love to tackle, and we may yet have time to pop up with the discussion questions. One question that came up was how many of the folks who came since October in that crush of 44,000 people we were trying to get through the system, how many of those are in Wisconsin and where? Do we have a sense of that?
Great question. I think Omar may be able to tell us about the number that we welcomed at our agency, and then maybe that can be an example of the others that may have come into Wisconsin. Omar?
Yes. I think our agency, we got about 162 of that number. And I know at least another 300 or 400 came from other agencies just in Milwaukee. I don't know if I don't have the total number, the whole Wisconsin, But like Sarah puts in, that is an example. Everyone was getting, if not what we got, if not more, because the president was pushing for it. So you can literally say about 200 times all the 8 resettlement agencies that is in throughout Wisconsin.
So it's
Sure.
not a
That's-
small number. Great question.
Yeah, so I mean, be reasonable to say somewhere between 1,500 and 2,000 people.
Yes, definitely. And I think where they are, Eau Claire, there's an office, Wild Relief, Wausau, Wisconsin, Sheboygan, Green
Madison.
Bay, Milwaukee, definitely Madison. That's other areas where they are
Mhm.
mainly.
A question has just popped up. How does somebody find out if there are refugee families in their area that they could support in some way?
That is a very good question. You know what? Give me 1 second. I will send you the link to um, the state refugee coordinator office in Wisconsin. You can reach out to them and they know exactly who's where and when. Now, how much they want to share, it depends what you're asking and who you are. But
Just
I'll
maybe
send
one
that.
more detail for people to understand. Generally, when refugees arrive, they are resettled within a certain distance of one of those refugee resettlement programs. And as you can imagine, that's so that they can get those intensive services without having to travel a lot to do that. So generally, they're placed. Omar, how many miles is it that we currently have? Is it 100 miles?
So it's 100 miles if they have a relative, but it's generally within a 50-mile radius.
Mhm.
The law says 100. Sorry, I just break my fast.
That's okay.
But yeah, it's 100 miles. Right now, I don't think it's necessary for anybody to resettle beyond 100 miles because the way they strategize this, there's like refugees pretty much around the main cities. Like anybody who want to resettle around Racine or whatnot, we can service it. People in the Green Bay area, in the Fox Valley area, there are folks, things like that. But I'm gonna send that. I'm gonna put this in the chat for you guys' knowledge so you can reach out to the state refugee coordinator office and they can tell you if there's anywhere near refugee service.
Wonderful. Thank you.
It's a lot
There's
of resources if people would like to read, enjoy.
there is a question about how you're working with the other organizations that are doing the same or similar work.
Yeah, we are lucky in Wisconsin to have a very involved state refugee coordinator office that we pretty much meet. Well, right now we meet every week after this happened. Before we used to meet every 2 weeks. The contractors and also the case management to look about what the trends, what's changing, what's working, what's not working. Now we're meeting to strategize what's going to happen now. Funding is not, how we're going to get funding, who knows any resources, what can we do? So we are meeting pretty much every week.
Is there hope that court rulings might force the administration to restore funding?
There is a hope, and the court rulings always already said restart the funding. The problem is, will the administration listen? Because there's multiple court litigation already happened that where he was ordered to start releasing those funds. Like because most of the refugee funding is attached to the USAID funding, the foreign USAID funding. So that's why it's lumped. But the court, a judge already told him to do it, release the funding. They ran out to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court says, yes, you have to obey the rule. Go ahead, please release those funds. And this was all because of the foreign aid. So yes, the law is there. Now we just need people who can enforce.
And if those funds aren't released, what are you collectively, or what are we collectively, say all of these agencies, able to do for refugees without those funds?
To be honest, but go ahead.
Yeah, I was just
Leave
gonna
saying.
say, I think, that as we said at the beginning, it's an ever-changing landscape. And what we learn each week has been changing a lot. I will say just this little bit of historical perspective from LSS. We're an organization that's been around 143 years, and we've lived through pandemics and world wars and changes in administration and all kinds of things that have, given a lot of challenge at times. But because of that partnership that we have, particularly with our church congregations, we have been able to sustain and maintain a lot of very important programming like refugee resettlement. There was a time in the recent past when this administration was in power before, where there was a great reduction in the number of refugees coming into the country. It wasn't stopped like it is right now, but it was greatly reduced. And at that time, there were a number of refugee resettlement programs around the country that had to kind of close up shop. We were not in that situation. We were able to sustain our programming, and a large part of that was because of that support that we have with our church partners. So part of that is what we do together collectively. I can tell you that LSS is committed to doing the very best that we can, but these are times where we have to be careful about being good stewards of the gifts that are given to us. And some of those gifts are those things that come through our government programs. So there are some tough times ahead, and it means that we may need to scale some things and make sure that we're being responsible with the scale of our program. But Omar, go ahead and share more from your perspective.
No, I think you said it well. And that's what we strategize when we meet with our local partners as well as the refugee coordinators. They always tell us, "Hey, don't give up because this is gonna pass. It's a temporary. It's a 4 years, and then next 4 years another president is gonna come and is gonna restart. So if you shut now, it will be hard to rebuild later. So find resources wherever you can, at least to keep the skeleton version of the program, so that you have a blueprint when things restart. So that's where we are. We are under the mercy of the community and the federal government, and with ourselves."
Sarah and Omar, I want to thank you for sharing so openly and honestly the importance and the impact of your programs and the situation that programs serving refugees and asylees are in right now. You've been very clear that you are in some ways a case study. You're an example of what your peer organizations are also facing. I had a conversation yesterday with a leader in the Roman Catholic Church, and they were talking about the situation faced by Catholic Charities and Catholic Aid around the world, doing very much the same work. And we know our friends in the interfaith community, in the Jewish community, who are doing good and challenging work as well. We wanted you to know, as planners of this event, that this is a justice issue, this is a racial justice issue, this is a diversity issue that matters to us. And this has been a core item for us as we've been planning these events. And so we wanted to make sure we brought it to those who have been following our community and our messages. We always have an action step, some sort of call to action that is an option for those who have been following us. You've offered one, this question of how can you actually get engaged in the organization, right? How can I pray? How can I give? How can I use my network to support the organization? And that is critically important because talking about it and saying, oh, woe is me, oh, woe is us, only goes so far. Telling the stories of hardship is important, but getting to the what do we do now is also important. And so I want to echo that call to pray, to companion, to say, how can I personally get involved? But we also said, as the organizers of this event, we wanted folks to get in touch with their federal legislators. And if you have already been getting in touch with your federal legislators, as we hope you have been, please do it again. Please make a regular appointment on your calendar, however you keep your calendar, to get in touch with your federal legislators, whether or not they agree with you. If they don't agree with you, they can hear from you and hear strongly about your perspective. And if they do agree with you, they can use your encouragement to be a little bit more fierce and to keep it up when they hear so many negative messages. However they feel about the issues, they need to hear your voice. If you don't know who your federal legislators are, myvote.wi.gov. You can enter your address and you can find out everyone you elect, and you have a way to use your voice. Don't take it for granted. This is an opportunity to make it clear what your values are and where you stand. I see the word anxious in the comments, and I want to call everybody's attention to this fabulous comment that has just shown up. Thank you for this. Much of this is new for me, and I am anxious to share with my connections. I will get in touch with those in charge. That is the best use of anxious that I have seen since January. I would like people to be anxious to share important opportunities to act with their connections. So Mary, thank you for bringing that to us and reminding us that every now and then there's actually a good reason to be anxious, to move forward with things we actually can do. All of the organizations that co-sponsor this have values that are about networking and connection. Isn't that right, David? I'm looking at David Liners, my partner from Wisdom. Networking, connection, the strength of our collective values and our collective action. And I want to remind you that you're not alone. In the face of an onslaught of division and exclusion, it is easy to feel alone. And you are here on a call with dozens of people, and dozens more are going to watch the video of tonight. And there are even more on the mailing list of people who share this values, and even more in our networks. You are not as alone as it may sometimes feel. Please reach out and connect with your networks if you ever feel isolated, because we do not want you to have to go through these challenging times alone. Sarah and Omar, is there anything else you would like to say about your organization, your work, the situation facing organizations like yours, or what you would invite people to do?
I would just echo what you just shared, that this is a time for people to take action, to feel that calling to do something. And if you're feeling uneasy, it may be because you're being called to do something big. It's a time where we're being called to do something big because we're facing some pretty big issues. So I would say that, kind of in summary from LSS, if I had to sum up things, I would say thank you, because we historically have had this blessing of partnership with organizations like Wisconsin Council of Churches and Wisdom and so many, many others that have allowed us to be able to continue this ministry. It's not easy work. We weren't called to do something easy. We were called to do something big. And I appreciate everyone who's willing to take that extra step to prayerfully consider, how can I do something? Because we're all part of this. We're all connected. And each one of us does have a role to play. And it is so, so very appreciated by our organization, but especially by the people that we serve, because that's why we're here. And helping to improve those lives is why we're here. So that's what I would say. Omar?
Yeah, I was just gonna say I put a link on the chat. I think the fast one will give you into confusing website, but this will direct you to all the agencies that welcome in refugee in your neighborhood. But what I'm gonna add, Sarah said it all well, but I'm gonna say, think of this. There's on top of all the economic impact happening, the community is also scared, especially the refugee communities, because you guys know what's happening about ICE and things in that nature. Some of these population look like the folks that they're looking for. So again, if you know there is somebody in your community who's a refugee, be a friend, be kind to them, support them, give them that there are some people who care about them, not everybody out there to get them. At the end of the day, Reverend Carey said it well. They're like human beings like us. They just need the help. That's it. So view as them, be a friend to them, welcome them, know who they are. Trust me, if you get to know some of them, you're gonna fall in love with them. They're hardworking and honest people, just trying to get a fair share and a chance to be the potential they can be. Thank you.
Absolutely. One more thing before our closing devotion is I'm going to call on my colleague, David Liners from Wisdom, because if you are scared to make that legislative contact by yourself, Wisdom has a whole event coming up where you can go with a bunch of your brand new friends. David, did you want to share?
Sure. Thank you. And I just also want to add my thanks to Sarah and Omar. Just appreciate this and really appreciate your work and appreciate everything that you're doing. Just want to invite all of you, whether or not you're a member of a wisdom group, doesn't matter. We have our Madison Action Day coming up on April 10th, so a month from yesterday. It's a Thursday. I'm going to put the Wisdom website in the chat so you can see it. So you're very welcome there. We have buses coming from Eau Claire, Wausau, Green Bay, Appleton, Milwaukee, Racine, Kenosha, Waukesha. So you can probably catch a bus. You can catch a ride with somebody. It's very energizing. We're hoping to have at least 800 of us, if not more, gathering at the Masonic Center a few blocks away from the Capitol. You get to meet a lot of people. You get to hear a lot of things that's pretty inspirational. And then we all march together over to the Capitol. And then we all gather on the Capitol steps for a rally, which is it's a good sight. It's just kind of nice to see 1,000 people who kind of share your values, and it's a good reminder that you're not alone. And then we all go in to go visit our legislators. And when people are registered, we're going to get people in groups so that you know who else is from your district to go visit your state senator, your state assembly person. We'll have appointments with them there. And it's a chance we're going to be talking about criminal justice reform. We're going to be talking about immigrant issues, particularly driver's licenses. We're going to be talking about healthcare, Medicaid expansion, that sort of thing. We're going to be talking about public schools, funding, and also we always tell people, hey, you're the citizen. You get to say, you can talk to your legislator about whatever you want to talk to them about as well. So that's, again, it's April 10th. If you just go to the Wisdom website, which is wisdomwisconsin.org, putting it in the, you should be able to find the registration on there. There's lunch, there's a t-shirt, you know, it's should be big fun. So hope to see you there. If you have any questions, just let us know.
Excellent. Sarah and Omar and all of your colleagues at LSS know that you go with our prayers and our blessings and our hope that you have what you need for each day, because that's all we can ask for, and that there is hope for the next. I have a few words for a closing blessing, and I have a reminder to you to mark April 8th, which would be our next gathering date. And for everyone registered here, we will send out information about the speaker and a registration link. So with that in mind, join me in a spirit of prayer once again. In our compassion for all who are suffering, have mercy on us. From the greed and injustice that divides the world, deliver us. From being quick to blame and slow to respond, deliver us. From the desire for revenge that adds to the cycle of violence, deliver us. For those who bring healing and peace, hear our prayer. For those who respond in crisis, hear our prayer. For wisdom to choose paths of peace, hear our prayer. For solidarity with those experiencing loss, hear our prayer. For generosity to share fairly the world's resources, hear our prayer. For families who have lost all they own and want to return home, hear our prayer. For aid agencies and workers, hear our prayer. Amen.